Honorable Dr. Edmund Mansour, Minister of Telecommunications, Science and Technology, Honorable Winston Williams, Minister of Education, Sports, Youth and Gender Affairs, and my colleagues Harapati from the UNESCO Regional Office, and our expert and accomplished facilitator Neil Butcher, Jacinta Pringle, Director of Education, Pachita Spencer, the Commonwealth of Learning Focal Point, Dr. Reginald Murphy, Head of the UNESCO National Commission, and all of the other education officers, principals, and the other guests. I want to welcome you to this workshop. It's always a little incongruous for me to have these kinds of working events in beach resorts, but fortunately we have no windows, so you won't be distracted by the beautiful beaches out there, which we took advantage of yesterday. To me, it's a real sign of the commitment of Antigua and Barbuda to this whole notion of ICT in education and developing a strategy and the use of open educational resources to have both the ministers here to open this event. I think that really sends a very strong signal of your commitment to what we're trying to achieve and what you're trying to achieve with these two workshops. I want to pick up on one point that the Honorable Minister of Telecommunications, Science and Technology, Dr. Edmund Mansour, made. And he didn't use the term, but I took it to mean, you know, we need to stop trying to reinvent the wheel, that there are many excellent frameworks and best practices that have been developed in other countries and other regions by different organizations, and we need to draw on those, adapt them, and apply them to the context, and in this case to your context, rather than trying to constantly reinvent the wheel. And that's exactly, ironically, what open educational resources are all about, which is making use of the existing expertise and knowledge that has gone into developing resources, using those resources, not necessarily as they exist, but adapting them for the local circumstances. And that's exactly what this two-day workshop, or actually the whole 4 days, because we have two workshops, are all about, is harnessing OERs for those purposes. I want to give you a little bit of background to this workshop because there has been a change. Originally, this two-day workshop was going to be devoted entirely to the development of an open educational resource policy for Antigua and Barbuda. But we had some discussions with Stacey Maskell, and we also just came off doing a similar event, two-day workshops in Grenada. And based on our experiences there and our discussions with Stacey and our examination of the background documents that we were provided with, what we found out was that Antigua and Barbuda does not have a fully developed ICT and education strategy, just as Grenada doesn't have. And we felt that it would not make a lot of sense to focus 2 days entirely on developing an OER policy without that overall strategy being in place. So what we've decided to do with these 2 days is to focus instead on developing or trying to identify the priorities for an ICT and education strategy, and then embedding OER policy within that. So there will still be discussion of OER and OER policy and some of the issues around open educational resources, but we will be doing that in the context of developing an ICT and education strategy and related policies. And Neil will be explaining that in much more detail when he begins the workshop. And then the second workshop, the second 2 days, will drill down a little bit in more detail and focus on one aspect of an ICT and education strategy, which is teacher professional development, and in this case, teacher professional development framed by the ICT competency framework for teachers that was developed by UNESCO. So there's an example of an existing approach that a lot of effort has gone into developing, and which is a very excellent framework for ICT competencies, and we will be using that to frame those discussions. And again, not necessarily to suggest that that kind of framework needs to be implemented exactly as it exists, but it certainly should be the starting point for the discussions. So the key to all of this, though, really is not so much what happens here. Of course, these 2 days are going to be critical, and they're going to be very productive, I hope, and intensive. I know that's going to happen because based on what we've done before, these are very hardworking. You're going to be spending a lot of time in deep discussions and dialogue about these issues. And that's critical. But the really critical part is what happens afterwards, because we can come up with some very nicely worded documents that come out of these 2 days. But if we don't follow that up with action, with a plan to implement what comes out of this, then these 2 days are not going to realize their potential. So it's really the follow-up that is critical. So with that, I'll conclude and just welcome you to the workshop, and I look forward to 2 very productive days of dialogue and discussion. Thank you.